The sun beat down on the New Mexico territory in 1887, baking the land until the earth cracked and crumbled. Dust devils danced across the barren fields, mocking Sarah Caldwell's desperate attempts to coax life from the parched soil. Her small farmhouse stood lonely against the horizon, a testament to dreams slowly fading. Sarah, a widow now for 2 long years, felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. Her husband, Thomas, had been a strong, hopeful man, but a fever had taken him too soon, leaving her alone with nothing but a failing farm and memories. The relentless drought had stolen her crops, her savings, and nearly her spirit. Each sunrise brought a fresh wave of despair, a reminder of the empty well, the withered plants, and the gnawing hunger. She walked through her small home, her boots kicking up dust from the wooden floorboards. A picture of Thomas hung crookedly on the wall, his smiling face a painful reminder of what she had lost. She touched the glass, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Oh, Thomas," she whispered, "what am I going to do?" Outside, the wind howled like a hungry wolf, carrying with it the scent of dust and the promise of nothing. Sarah knew she couldn't give up, not yet. Thomas wouldn't have wanted that. But hope was a fragile thing, easily broken by the harsh realities of the West. She decided to walk to the creek bed, even though it had been dry for months. Maybe, just maybe, there would be a small puddle left, enough to water her last tomato plant. As she walked, the sun seemed to mock her efforts, intensifying the heat and magnifying her thirst. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her face, shielding herself from the relentless glare. Little did she know, her life was about to change in a way she could never have imagined. A chance encounter would soon test her strength and reveal the hidden resilience within her. The sun, a relentless eye in the sky, watched Sarah's every move as she made her way towards the dry creek bed. The air shimmered with heat, making the distant mesas look like blurry paintings. Each step was a struggle, her boots sinking into the fine dust that had once been rich soil. She remembered the days when the creek flowed freely, gurgling and splashing, providing life to her farm. Thomas used to fish there, and they'd laugh as he tried to outsmart the wily trout. Now it was just a cracked, empty scar on the land. She thought of Thomas often, especially during these hard times. He had been her rock, her partner, her everything. They had come to New Mexico with big dreams, visions of a thriving farm and a family. They had worked tirelessly, clearing the land, planting seeds, and building their little home. But the West was a harsh mistress, and fate had dealt them a cruel blow. His absence was a constant ache in her heart, a void that no amount of hard work could fill. The drought had started subtly, a few weeks without rain turning into months. The crops began to wither, the animals grew thin, and hope dwindled with each passing day. Sarah had tried everything she could think of, praying for rain, digging deeper into the well, even rationing the water until she was parched. But nothing seemed to work. The land was determined to break her. As she neared the creek bed, she scanned the horizon, hoping against hope to see a sign of water. A hawk circled overhead, its sharp cry echoing through the silence. Sarah sighed, her shoulders slumping. She knew it was a long shot, but she had to try. She had promised Thomas she would never give up, and she intended to keep that promise, even if it meant facing the impossible. She reached the creek bed and began to walk along its cracked floor, her eyes searching for any sign of moisture. The sun beat down harder, but she pressed on, driven by a flicker of hope and the memory of her husband's unwavering spirit. The creek bed was bone dry, the cracked earth a mosaic of despair. Sarah walked slowly, her eyes scanning every inch of the parched ground. Disappointment weighed heavily on her, but she refused to succumb to it. She had to keep searching. As she rounded a bend in the creek bed, she noticed something unusual. A dark shape lay huddled beneath the shade of a scraggly cottonwood tree. Her heart pounded in her chest. Was it an animal or something else? She approached cautiously, her hand instinctively reaching for the small knife she carried in her pocket. As she got closer, she realized it was a person. A man, lying motionless on the ground. He was dressed in worn leather clothing, and his long, dark hair was matted with dirt and blood. Sarah's initial fear gave way to concern. He looked badly hurt. She knelt beside him, her hand trembling as she reached out to check for a pulse. It was faint, but there. He was alive. He was young, maybe not much older than her. She noticed the intricate beadwork on his clothes and the symbols etched into his leather wristbands. He was Apache. Sarah knew that many settlers feared the Apache, viewing them as dangerous and untrustworthy. But Sarah saw only a wounded man in need of help. Her own hardships had taught her the value of compassion, and she couldn't bring herself to leave him to die. She hesitated for a moment, considering the risks. Helping him could bring trouble. The townsfolk might not understand, but she couldn't turn her back on someone in need. Thomas would have done the same. With a deep breath, she made her decision. She would help him, whatever the cost. She gently shook his shoulder. "Hey," she said softly. "Can you hear me?" The man groaned, his eyes fluttering open. He looked at her with confusion and pain. Sarah knew she had a long and difficult task ahead of her, but she was ready to face it. She had found someone who needed her help, and she wouldn't let him down. Nako, as Sarah would later learn his name was, groaned again, his eyes struggling to focus. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pain shot through his side, causing him to cry out. Sarah gently pushed him back down. "Easy," she said, her voice soft and reassuring. "You're hurt. You need to rest." He looked at her with suspicion, his dark eyes filled with distrust. He didn't understand why this white woman was helping him. He had been taught to fear them, to see them as enemies. But there was something in her eyes, a genuine kindness that he couldn't ignore. Sarah carefully examined his wound. It was a deep gash on his side, likely caused by a knife or a sharp rock. It was bleeding, but not profusely. She knew she had to clean it and bandage it quickly to prevent infection. "I'm going to clean your wound," she said, speaking slowly and clearly. "It's going to hurt, but it will help you get better." She didn't know if he understood her words, but she hoped he could sense her intentions. She carefully tore a strip of clean cloth from her petticoat, wincing at the thought of wasting the precious fabric. She then walked to the edge of the creek bed and began digging in the damp earth, hoping to find a small pocket of water. After several minutes of frantic digging, her shovel struck something wet. Her heart leaped with joy. It wasn't much, just a small puddle of muddy water, but it was enough. She carefully scooped up the water with her hands and carried it back to Nako. She used the water to gently clean the wound, wincing at his pained expression. She knew it must hurt terribly, but he remained silent, his jaw clenched tight. Once the wound was clean, she applied a poultice of herbs she had gathered from her garden, hoping to ward off infection. She then bandaged the wound tightly with a strip of cloth. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "That should help for now." Nako looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. He still didn't trust her completely, but he knew that she had saved his life. He managed a weak nod, a silent acknowledgement of her kindness. Sarah smiled, relieved that she had been able to help. But she knew that their journey was just beginning. She had taken in a wounded Apache warrior, and she had no idea what the future held. But she was ready to face it together. Getting Nako back to the farmhouse was a challenge. He was weak and in pain, and Sarah was small. She fashioned a makeshift crutch for him from a sturdy branch she found near the creek bed. Slowly, painstakingly, they made their way back, Sarah supporting him every step of the way. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air cooled slightly, offering a brief respite from the oppressive heat. Sarah knew they had to reach the farmhouse before nightfall. When they finally arrived, Sarah helped Nako inside and settled him on her cot. The small cabin felt even smaller with him inside. He watched her every move, his eyes still guarded. Sarah understood his apprehension. He was a stranger in a strange land, relying on the kindness of someone he didn't know. She offered him some of the rabbit stew she had been saving for herself, but he refused, shaking his head. Sarah didn't push him. She knew he was probably used to different food. Instead, she gave him a cup of water, which he gratefully accepted. Over the next few days, Sarah tended to Nakoa's wound, changing the bandages and applying fresh herbs. She spoke to him in simple terms, explaining what she was doing and why. Slowly, his suspicion began to fade, replaced by a grudging respect. She learned a few words of his language, and he learned a few of hers. They communicated through gestures and drawings in the dirt. Sarah discovered that Nako was a skilled hunter and tracker. He told her stories of his people, their traditions, and their struggles to survive in a changing world. Sarah, in turn, told him about her life, her dreams, and her loss. She shared her memories of Thomas, her love for the land, and her determination to make a life for herself in this harsh environment. As they shared their stories, a bond began to form between them. They were two people from different worlds, brought together by circumstance and united by their shared humanity. Sarah knew that their journey was far from over, but she was no longer afraid. She had found a friend in the most unlikely of places, and she knew that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Her kindness had not only saved Nakoa's life, but had also given her a renewed sense of purpose. As the days turned into weeks, Nako grew stronger. He started helping Sarah with chores around the farm, mending fences, fixing the roof, and tending to the few remaining crops. He had a natural understanding of the land, and Sarah was amazed by his knowledge of plants and animals. He showed her how to find edible roots and berries, and how to track animals in the desert. He taught her how to listen to the wind and the earth, and how to read the signs of the coming weather. Sarah, in turn, showed him how to cultivate the land, how to plant seeds, and how to irrigate the crops using the limited water supply. Nako told Sarah about his tribe, the Warm Springs Apache, and their way of life. He spoke of their reverence for nature, their skill as warriors, and their deep connection to the land. He explained how the white settlers had taken their land and forced them onto reservations, disrupting their traditional way of life. Sarah listened with empathy, realizing that she had never truly understood the struggles of the Native American people. She began to see the world through Nakoa's eyes, and she realized that the West was a place of both beauty and injustice. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Nako told Sarah about his family. He had lost his parents and his younger sister in a raid by the U.S. cavalry. He was the only survivor. Sarah felt a pang of sympathy for him, knowing what it was like to lose loved ones. "I understand your pain, Nako," she said softly. "I lost my husband, Thomas, 2 years ago. It's not easy to go on, but we have to find a way." Nako looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. He had never shared his story with anyone before, but he felt comfortable opening up to Sarah. He knew that she understood him and that she cared. As Nako regained his strength, he began to talk about returning to his people. He felt a responsibility to help them, to protect them from the encroaching settlers. Sarah knew that he had to go, but she would miss him terribly. "Understand, Nako," she said. "You have to do what you think is right. But please come back and visit me sometime." Nako smiled. "I will, Sarah," he said. "You're my friend. I will never forget you." The day Nako prepared to leave, a sense of sadness hung heavy in the air. Sarah tried to hide her disappointment, but Nako could see it in her eyes. He knew he owed her a debt he could never fully repay. "I will never forget your kindness, Sarah," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "You saved my life. I will find a way to repay you." Sarah smiled sadly. "You don't owe me anything, Nako," she said. "Just knowing that you're well is enough." Before dawn the next morning, Nako left. Sarah watched him disappear over the horizon, a lone figure silhouetted against the rising sun. She felt a pang of loneliness, but she knew that he was doing what he had to do. Several weeks passed, and Sarah continued to work on the farm, struggling to keep it afloat in the face of the relentless drought. She missed Nakoa's company and his knowledge of the land. She often wondered if she would ever see him again. One morning, as she was tending to her garden, she heard a distant rumble. She looked up and saw a cloud of dust rising in the distance. As the dust cloud drew closer, she could make out the shapes of horses, dozens of them, running wild and free across the plains. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. She had never seen so many horses in one place before. As the horses drew closer, she recognized Nako, riding at the head of the herd. He was smiling, his face beaming with pride. He guided the horses towards her farm, and they galloped into her fields, their hooves pounding the dry earth. Sarah watched in amazement as the horses spread out across her land, grazing on the sparse vegetation. Nako rode up to her, dismounted, and approached her with a grin. "I told you I would repay you," Sarah said. "These are Mustangs, wild horses from the mountains. They are strong and resilient, and they will help you rebuild your farm." Sarah was speechless. She couldn't believe that Nako had brought her such a magnificent gift. She looked at the horses, their wild eyes and untamed spirit, and she knew that her life would never be the same again. "Thank you, Nako," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "This is the most incredible gift I have ever received." Nako stayed with Sarah for several more weeks, teaching her how to work with the Mustangs. He explained that they were wild and independent, but also intelligent and loyal. He emphasized the importance of patience and respect. "You cannot force them to do anything, Sarah," he said. "You must earn their trust. Show them kindness and understanding, and they will respond in kind." Sarah listened carefully, absorbing Nako's wisdom. She had never worked with horses before, but she was determined to learn. She spent hours observing the Mustangs, studying their behavior, and learning their individual personalities. She started by offering them food and water, speaking to them in a gentle voice. Slowly, they began to approach her, their initial fear giving way to curiosity. She learned to brush them, clean their hooves, and saddle them. Nako showed her how to ride the Mustangs bareback, teaching her how to move with their rhythm and anticipate their movements. He explained that the key was to become one with the horse, to feel its energy and to understand its intentions. Sarah discovered that she had a natural affinity for the Mustangs. She loved their wild spirit and their untamed beauty. She felt a connection to them that she couldn't explain. Together, Sarah and Nako began to train the Mustangs to work on the farm. They used them to plow the fields, to haul water, and to transport goods to town. The Mustangs were strong and tireless, and they quickly transformed Sarah's farm from a struggling homestead into a thriving ranch. Sarah also learned how to breed the Mustangs, selecting the strongest and healthiest animals to produce even more offspring. She realized that the Mustangs were not just a gift, but a resource that could sustain her for years to come. As Sarah worked with the Mustangs, she felt a sense of empowerment that she had never experienced before. She was no longer just a widow struggling to survive. She was a rancher, a horsewoman, a force to be reckoned with. Nako watched Sarah with pride, knowing that she had found her true calling. He had repaid her kindness in the best way he knew how, by giving her the tools she needed to rebuild her life. He knew that their friendship would last a lifetime, and that together, they had created something truly special. The change in Sarah's farm was remarkable. Where once there had been only dust and withered plants, now there were green fields and blooming flowers. The Mustangs helped to revitalize the land, their hooves aerating the soil and their manure providing valuable fertilizer. Sarah planted new crops, using the Mustangs to plow the fields and haul water from the well. She grew corn, beans, and squash, and she even managed to cultivate a small orchard of fruit trees. The farm became an oasis in the desert, a testament to Sarah's hard work and Nako's generosity. She started selling her produce at the local market in town. People were amazed by the quality of her crops, especially considering the drought conditions. They were also impressed by her Mustangs, which were strong and well-trained. Sarah quickly gained a reputation as a skilled rancher and a shrewd businesswoman. She earned the respect of the townsfolk, many of whom had initially doubted her ability to survive on her own. With the money she earned, Sarah was able to improve her farm, building new fences, repairing her house, and purchasing new equipment. She even hired a few local hands to help her with the workload. Her once empty and desolate home was now filled with life and activity. The sounds of horses neighing, chickens clucking, and children laughing filled the air. Sarah had created a haven, a place of hope and prosperity in a land of hardship. The Mustangs not only transformed Sarah's farm, but they also transformed her. She was no longer the grieving widow, haunted by the past. She was a strong, independent woman in control of her own destiny. She had learned to adapt to the harsh realities of the West, to embrace the challenges, and to find joy in the simple things. She had discovered her inner strength and her ability to overcome adversity. Sarah's story became an inspiration to others in the community. People admired her resilience and her determination. They saw her as a symbol of hope, a reminder that anything is possible with hard work and perseverance. Even the drought seemed to lessen its grip on her farm, as if the land itself was responding to her efforts. The well started to yield more water, and the rains came more frequently. Sarah's farm became a beacon of green in a sea of brown, a testament to the power of compassion, cooperation, and the enduring spirit of the West. However, not everyone was happy about Sarah's success. Some of the townsfolk were envious of her thriving ranch, especially those whose own farms were still struggling. They whispered behind her back, spreading rumors and questioning how she had managed to become so successful so quickly. Others were suspicious of her relationship with Nako, viewing him as a dangerous savage. They couldn't understand why she would trust an Apache warrior, especially after all the conflicts between the settlers and the Native Americans. The sheriff, a gruff and narrow-minded man named Jedediah, was particularly wary of Sarah. He had always been suspicious of the Apache, and he saw Nako's presence as a threat to the peace of the community. He started to harass Sarah, making frequent visits to her ranch and asking her intrusive questions. He accused her of harboring a fugitive and of stealing the Mustangs from the government. Sarah tried to ignore the rumors and the harassment, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. She knew that the townsfolk were watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. One day, a group of men from town rode up to her ranch, led by Jedediah. They were armed and angry, and they demanded to know where Nako was. "He's not here," Sarah said, standing her ground. "He left weeks ago." "We don't believe you," Jedediah said, his voice menacing. "We know he's hiding somewhere on this ranch. We're going to search the place." Sarah refused to let them search her property without a warrant. She knew that they were just looking for an excuse to cause trouble. Jedediah and his men became increasingly agitated, threatening to use force if she didn't cooperate. Sarah stood firm, refusing to back down. The situation escalated quickly, and a heated argument ensued. Just as it seemed like a fight was about to break out, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. It was Nako. He had returned to check on Sarah, sensing that she was in danger. His presence only fueled the townsfolk's anger and suspicion. The stage was set for a confrontation that could change everything. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Nako stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Jedediah. "Leave her alone," he said, his voice low and menacing. "She has done nothing wrong." "You're the one who doesn't belong here," Jedediah sneered. "You and your kind are nothing but thieves and murderers." "We are not thieves," Nako retorted. "We are just trying to survive like everyone else." "Then why are you hiding on this woman's ranch?" Jedediah demanded. "I'm not hiding," Nako said. "I came back to make sure she was safe." Sarah stepped between them, trying to defuse the situation. "Please, everyone, let's just calm down," she pleaded. "We don't need any violence." But Jedediah was not listening. He was determined to arrest Nako, regardless of the consequences. He drew his gun and pointed it at Nako's chest. "I'm taking you in, savage," he said. "And this time, you're not getting away." Before Jedediah could pull the trigger, Sarah stepped in front of Nako, shielding him with her body. "No," she cried. "You're not going to hurt him." Jedediah hesitated, surprised by Sarah's bravery. He lowered his gun slightly, but he didn't back down. Just then, a group of Apache warriors emerged from the surrounding hills, their faces painted for war. They had followed Nako, concerned for his safety. They surrounded the townsfolk, their bows and arrows drawn and ready. The townsfolk were outnumbered and outgunned. They knew that they were no match for the Apache warriors. They slowly lowered their weapons, their bravado disappearing. Nako raised his hand, signaling the warriors to stand down. He turned to Jedediah, his eyes filled with anger and disappointment. "We do not want war," he said, "but we will defend ourselves if we have to." Jedediah, realizing that he was defeated, reluctantly holstered his gun. He and his men turned and rode away, leaving Sarah and Nako in peace. The incident shook Sarah deeply. She realized that she could no longer ignore the conflict between the settlers and the Native Americans. She knew that she had to do something to help bridge the gap between the two cultures. Despite the risk, Sarah began sharing her food and water with Nakoa's tribe, who were also suffering from the drought. She knew it was a dangerous decision, but she couldn't stand by and watch them starve. She saw them as people, not as enemies, and she believed that everyone deserved a chance to survive. With Nako acting as a translator and guide, Sarah began to spend more time with the Apache tribe. She learned about their customs, their beliefs, and their deep respect for the land. She discovered that they were not the savages that the townsfolk made them out to be, but rather a people with a rich culture and a strong sense of community. She learned about their traditional methods of farming, which were adapted to the harsh desert environment. They showed her how to conserve water, how to plant crops that could withstand the drought, and how to use native plants for medicinal purposes. In return, Sarah shared her knowledge of modern farming techniques with the Apache. She showed them how to use plows and irrigation systems to increase their crop yields. She also taught them about new types of seeds and plants that could thrive in the desert. The Apache were initially skeptical of Sarah's methods, but they were willing to learn. They saw that her techniques were effective, and they were impressed by her willingness to share her knowledge. As Sarah and the Apache learned from each other, a bond of trust and respect began to grow between them. They realized that they had more in common than they thought. They both shared a love for the land and a desire to survive in a harsh environment. The Apache helped Sarah to better understand the Mustangs, explaining their wild nature and their unique abilities. They showed her how to communicate with the horses using gestures and sounds, and how to train them to work in harmony with humans. Sarah, in turn, taught the Apache how to care for the Mustangs, how to provide them with proper nutrition and medical care. She also showed them how to breed the horses to produce even stronger and healthier offspring. The exchange of knowledge and skills between Sarah and the Apache strengthened their alliance. They worked together to improve their farming techniques and to ensure that both the settlers and the Apache had enough to eat. However, their newfound harmony was threatened by a new danger. Word of Sarah's Mustangs had spread throughout the territory, and greedy ranchers and horse thieves began to eye her herd with envy. They saw the Mustangs as a valuable commodity, a way to make a quick profit. Sarah and Nako knew that they had to protect the horses at all costs. They formed a patrol, taking turns guarding the herd day and night. They also worked with the Apache warriors to set up a system of alarms, using smoke signals and drums to warn of any approaching danger. One night, a group of horse thieves attempted to raid Sarah's ranch. They crept in under the cover of darkness, hoping to steal away with as many Mustangs as possible. But Sarah and Nako were ready for them. They ambushed the thieves, using their knowledge of the land to their advantage. The Apache warriors rained down arrows from the surrounding hills, while Sarah and Nako charged into the fray, wielding their rifles with skill and determination. The horse thieves were caught completely by surprise. They put up a brief fight, but they were quickly overwhelmed by Sarah and Nakoa's forces. They were captured and turned over to the authorities. The incident sent a clear message to anyone who might be thinking of stealing Sarah's Mustangs. Her ranch was protected, and she would not hesitate to defend her property. Sarah and Nakoa's efforts to protect the Mustangs not only strengthened their bond, but they also helped to build trust between the settlers and the Apache. The townsfolk began to see that the Apache were not just warriors, but also protectors of the land and its resources. The shared threat of theft brought them together. As Sarah and Nako continued to work together, they realized that they had a shared vision for the future. They both wanted to create a place where people could learn about sustainable farming practices and the importance of protecting the natural world. They also wanted to create a sanctuary for the Mustangs, a place where they could roam free and thrive without fear of being hunted or stolen. One evening, as they sat by the fire, they began to discuss their ideas. "What if we started a special place," Sarah said, "a center where people could come to learn about farming and horse breeding, and a place where the Apache and the settlers could learn from each other," Nako added. "A place where we could share our knowledge and our traditions." They talked late into the night, refining their ideas and dreaming of what they could accomplish. They envisioned a center that would be open to everyone, regardless of their race or background. The center would offer classes on sustainable farming techniques, including water conservation, crop rotation, and natural pest control. It would also teach people about the importance of preserving native plants and animals. The center would also be a haven for the Mustangs, providing them with a safe and natural environment. People could come to learn about the horses, to observe their behavior, and to understand their unique needs. Sarah and Nako knew that their idea was ambitious, but they were determined to make it a reality. They believed that it was possible to create a better future for the West, a future where people and nature could coexist in harmony. They decided to call their center the Harmony Ranch, a symbol of their commitment to cooperation and understanding. They knew that it would take a lot of hard work and dedication to make their dream a reality, but they were ready to face the challenge. Their big idea was about to take shape, promising a lasting legacy of learning, preservation, and unity. Building the Harmony Ranch was a monumental task, but Sarah and Nako were not alone. People from all walks of life came to help, drawn by their vision of a better future. The Apache shared their knowledge of construction, using natural materials to build sturdy and sustainable structures. The settlers contributed their skills in carpentry and engineering, creating buildings that were both functional and beautiful. Even Sheriff Jedediah, who had initially been so suspicious of Sarah and Nako, came to see the value of their project. He offered his support, providing security and helping to organize the construction efforts. The townsfolk donated their time and resources, contributing lumber, tools, and food. They worked side by side with the Apache, learning about their culture and their traditions. Children helped to plant trees and flowers, creating a welcoming and vibrant environment. The elderly shared their wisdom and their stories, passing on their knowledge to the next generation. As the Harmony Ranch began to take shape, it became a symbol of unity and cooperation. People from different backgrounds and cultures came together, working toward a common goal. They built classrooms for teaching farming and horse breeding techniques. They constructed stables and pastures for the Mustangs, providing them with a safe and natural habitat. They created gardens and orchards, growing a variety of fruits and vegetables. They also built a community center, a place where people could gather to share meals, celebrate holidays, and learn from each other. The construction of the Harmony Ranch was not always easy. There were challenges and setbacks along the way. But Sarah and Nako never gave up on their dream. They inspired others to believe in their vision, and they worked tirelessly to make it a reality. Finally, after months of hard work and dedication, the Harmony Ranch was complete. It was a testament to the power of compassion, cooperation, and the enduring spirit of the West. The dream had become a tangible reality. The Harmony Ranch quickly became a beacon of hope in the New Mexico territory. People came from far and wide to learn about sustainable farming practices, to admire the Mustangs, and to experience the spirit of cooperation that permeated the center. Sarah and Nako continued to work together, sharing their knowledge and their wisdom with all who came. They taught people how to conserve water, how to grow crops that could withstand the drought, and how to care for the Mustangs in a way that was both humane and sustainable. The Apache shared their traditions and their culture with the settlers, teaching them about the importance of respecting the land and living in harmony with nature. The settlers, in turn, shared their skills and their knowledge with the Apache, helping them to adapt to a changing world. Children from both cultures played together, learning from each other and building friendships that would last a lifetime. The elderly shared their stories and their experiences, passing on their wisdom to the next generation. Even Sheriff Jedediah became a regular visitor to the Harmony Ranch. He learned to respect the Apache and to appreciate their culture. He even started to adopt some of their farming practices on his own land. Sarah's farm, once a symbol of despair, had become a place of hope and opportunity. She had transformed her life and her community through her compassion, her resilience, and her unwavering belief in the power of cooperation. She had found a new purpose in life, helping others to learn and to grow. She had built a lasting legacy, a testament to the enduring spirit of the West. As she looked out over the Harmony Ranch, Sarah smiled. She knew that Thomas would be proud of her. She had overcome adversity. She had found love and friendship in the most unlikely of places, and she had created a better future for herself and for others. The drought still came and went, but the spirit of the Harmony Ranch, the spirit of Sarah and Nako, remained strong, a shining example of what could be achieved when people work together for the common good. And so, Sarah's Western tale had a truly happy ending.